In this lecture, we will be looking at the way we measure crime rates and how we compare the different measures, how those compare to the actual rate of crime that takes place. The oldest and I don't want to say most official, we'll just say the oldest crime rate that we have in the United States is known as the Uniform Crime Report. It's produced by the FBI. It is collected and produced every year. The one for last year, it usually takes them about 8 months into the new year to get the last year's out. Sometimes longer, depending on logistical issues that they might be facing. But it's looking at crimes that are reported to the police, which are then reported in sort of an aggregate form to the FBI. And then they conglomerate the information that's given to them by all the local police forces and produce what is called Crime in the United States. It comes out every year. The major crimes they focus on are the index crimes listed here. The goal, though, is to get more information about crimes that are being committed. And the only crime that they usually do that with now is with murders. And they have what's called a supplemental homicide report, which collects as much information as possible about a variety of issues associated with the crime. When it took place, did the individuals know each other? There's a lot of things that go into the supplemental homicide report. So what they're trying to do is evolve the UCR into what's known as NIBRS, the National Incident Based Reporting System, where they're looking at more crimes, collecting more information, even things about the motivation of the crime. If they get to that, they have that much information available, looking at hate crimes and things like that. Basically, they want to apply the supplemental homicide report to all types of index crimes to start with, and then, all crimes that they get information on in the future. The goal is to have as much information possible to be able to look at trends, identify patterns. There's basically no reason not to collect as much information about this as possible. The other major source of crime rates that we have is the NCVS, the National Crime Victimization Survey, which is started in the 1960s as sort of a supplement to the UCR. The main issue with the UCR is that it's only crimes reported to the police. And there's a lot of reasons why someone wouldn't report a crime to the police. They might be afraid of the police. They might be afraid of the person that committed the crime. They might not even know at that time that they've been the victim of a crime. And it might not be until someone points something out or they discover something later that it actually comes up, and they don't even report it to the police because it's been so long. So there's a variety of reasons why someone wouldn't want to report a crime to the police or would be incapable of reporting a crime to the police. This is a more informal setting. It's done over the phone, and it gives people a chance to respond when they may have not done so in the past. They may not talk to the police. So that sort of gives us an idea of this is all the crime reported to the police. This is how much crime we find in the National Crime Victimization Survey, but we really think it's up here. So they know that there's always a gap in between the crime that's reported either in the UCR to the police or the National Crime Victimization Survey and the actual level of crime that happens. We call that the dark figure of crime, but one of the goals of the NCVS was to illuminate that. So we know the gap between crimes reported to the police and crimes that actually take place is fairly large. It's larger depending on certain types of crimes. Homicides, for instance, are reported very frequently because you have 200 pounds of evidence. Sexual assaults tend to be some of the least reported crimes to police. So the NCVS helps us figure that out and figure out what crimes are more or less likely to be reported to the police, why that is, and then even asking the victims about other impacts of the crimes, the long lasting effects on them, emotionally, physically, or economically. If someone has their work truck stolen, you're going to get a lot more information about the effects of that in the NCVS versus just seeing one auto theft in the UCR. Some of the pros and cons of the NCVS can typically have inaccurate reporting. Again, it's based on the interpretation of the person that's answering the questions, whether or not a crime has actually taken place. So you don't have that definitive criteria for what is or what counts for a particular type of crime. Sometimes they'll bring things in from outside the sample period. It could be that there's an issue with the interviewer or with the responder where they're trying to give the interviewer what they want. That can be an issue. Also, the effects of serial victimization. Again, that's something that might not be reported to the police, but also might not show up on here because you're talking to someone over the phone. You don't know if the serial offender is standing there beside them. There's a lot of things that can sort of come up as be issues with this. But again, it's not necessarily trying to show an accurate level of crime. We're just looking at the differences. And even the UCR, we know, doesn't show an accurate level of crime. But what it does, what the NCVS does, is if you look at both of them over a period of years, so over a period of decades, or at this point with the UCR has been around since the early part of the 1930s. So you have almost 100 years of data that you can look at and see the changes. Not necessarily what the numbers say, but is the level going up or down? Because we know that the underreporting, all those factors are going to be relatively constant over 30 years. So the changes up or down are real changes in the rates going up or down. Again, some of the pros of the NCVS, it gets demographic information, eliminating the dark figure of crime, looking at the other effects of crime that take place with the individuals that are facing the offenses. The basic finding is that more crime happens than what's reported to the police, and there's a variety of reasons why people don't report that. Just sort of the NCVS, UCR, what to know, population samples. The UCR is from crimes reported to the police. The NCVS is typically about 100,000 respondents every 6 months, taken from the United States population. Looking at a victimization event in the NCVS versus just the incident itself. The crime is one unit in the UCR. The criminal definitions can be widely different. UCR is basing it off of the criminal definitions of a particular area. Now, that can change from city to city, from state to state, but with the NCVS, you're looking at it potentially changing from respondent to respondent. And then the NCVS does not deal with homicides. We have not yet figured out a way to do a telephone survey with a dead person. The technology might be coming. It's not here yet. So until that happens, the NCVS does not deal in homicide data. And the UCR focuses very heavily on that with supplemental homicide report. Another type of crime rate information that we have is from self-report surveys. Typically, these are done on high criminal offending populations, which are either incarcerated individuals, people that have been convicted for crimes, or male juveniles, because they're young and dumb and do dumb things. The age crime curve shows that most people commit crimes from about age 15 to 21, with it peaking around age 17 to 19. So that's a very criminogenic population. On the hormones that are produced and metabolized in the juvenile male of humans are such that they do real stupid things. So we ask them questions about why that happens, how that happens, because they're on the front lines of doing dumb things. Now you typically have, in a lot of criminal studies, criminal surveys, particularly with incarcerated offenders, they're going to lie and tell you they didn't do stuff. With the juvenile males, you can sort of have the other way. So if you ask a group of 15-year-old males in a survey whether or not they've had sex, or whether or not they've smoked marijuana, or they've ever gotten drunk, they're going to lie and say that they have because they want to seem cool. Okay, so you have to deal with that sort of respondent bias in these issues. But they are a high offending population, and so it does get some good information in terms of rates of drug use, things like carrying a gun to school, levels of violence, rates of violence. A lot of that stuff doesn't get reported, especially with younger juveniles. So it's good to sort of pull back some of the layers that are covering that type of offending to see what's actually taking place. So it's another good sort of supplemental resource to go along with the UCR and the NCVS, which are the two main sources of crime rates.